Welcome. Welcome to the second of 4 Lunch and Learn webinars sponsored by NYSERDA. Thank you to NYSERDA for sponsoring and joining us today. I'm Krista Downey, ECO 2.0 Project Manager for Launch New York. And before we dive into hearing from our incredible lineup of speakers, let's take a moment to go over some important housekeeping items. So first, let's make sure that we keep ourselves muted until we open the floor for audience questions. And once we do want this webinar to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to engage with the content by sharing your thoughts, experiences, and questions in the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat. Following the webinar, we'll share the presentation slides and any additional resources discussed during the session via email. The webinar will be recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel where it can be accessed 24/7. During today's session, we'll dive deeper into customer acquisition. First, I'll tell you a bit more about Launch New York's ECO 2.0 program, as well as our Lunch and Learn webinar series. Following that, I'll pass the floor to Dr. Marnie Levine, who will provide a brief overview of Launch New York. You'll then hear from our moderator, Jillian Francis, who will introduce the speakers, Tanner Barron, VP of Strategic Growth at EdgeCom Energy, and Herbert Dwyer, co-founder and CEO of MPEC. We'll conclude the webinar with a moderated chat, including questions submitted directly by today's attendees. So Launch New York's Eco Incubator supports CleanTech startups with measurable and scalable impacts on New York State energy efficiency, renewable energy, greenhouse gas reduction, and overall sustainability. We support clients across a wide range of industries, including advanced manufacturing, energy storage and distribution, transportation, and more. The Eco Incubator is supported by the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA. So please save the date for our upcoming webinars using these QR codes. And I want to thank you all once again for joining today and thank NYSERDA for sponsoring this webinar series. Now, I'm honored to introduce you to Launch New York's President and CEO, Dr. Marnie Levine.
Thanks so much, Krista. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. Hopefully you can enjoy your lunch while you're hearing some great conversation and jumping in yourselves as well for this dynamic discussion. Wanted to just give you a quick overview for those of you not familiar with Launch New York. We are really dedicated to working with high growth potential startups. And you can hear we have a specialized program providing coaching and capital, particularly in the clean tech sector. We use one-on-one pro bono mentoring combined with group programming and other great resources and networking. So we are over 1,750 companies we've mentored pro bono since 2012. And those companies are really aligned with our mission, which is both job and wealth creation, supporting over 5,300 jobs. How do we do this? We basically are here, as many of us think of us as a capital provider. We are the most active seed fund in New York State, including the downstate area by volume of transaction. But we start always with our mentorship services. Happy to see a number of our entrepreneurs and residents have joined us here today. I want to thank you so much for the work you do with so many of the companies. And we have a number of our Eco Advisory Board members here, as well as many of our portfolio companies and companies going through our mentorship process. So the mentorship for a minimum of 3 months before you can apply for funding really is intended to get you ready, not just for our capital, but capital from other equity funding providers. With that application process, that leads us into a full due diligence where you'll have a data room. And so many of you may have that already. But we really, again, are here to serve you in being able to raise from launch during the seed stage, but we also want you to be prepared to attract Series A fund leaders and beyond. So the Launch New York funding, we actually have companies pitching our investment committee virtually every Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. And in fact, I will tell you that CleanTech in our newest fund, LP Fund 2, has actually now amounted to nearly a third of the portfolio. So we're very bullish on this sector. And then we move into an active portfolio management phase to really support you finding those growth milestones and follow-on funders, obviously with an eye toward that growth and ultimately exit opportunities. The programs we have available, once you get into the fold, you learn more, but we do have nonprofit seed fund, which is fed by grants and donations. And then we have for-profit, those green circles, where we have both funds that you'll be able to apply to, plus we have an investor network, which is the only syndicate dedicated to featuring upstate New York investment opportunities. And these can be at the pre-seed, seed, and Series A and even beyond stages. So to date, we have put out over $15 million to over 105 companies. And I'm proud to announce that we just released publicly that we have closed LP Fund 2 at $15.775 million. And we have already invested in 16 companies, as I mentioned, with significant representation among the clean tech sector. So we encourage both entrepreneurs who want to apply for our services, as well as investors interested in jumping into some of our investment programs to visit our website and get involved. Happy to pass back to an amazing colleague, Jillian Francis.
Thank you, Marnie. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jillian Francis, and I am the managing partner at Rapid Ventures. We're actually partnered with Launch New York. We are a climate tech acceleration studio that is bridging the commercialization financing gap with stackable, non-dilutive funding that is complementary to a lot of the equity that is being invested into this space. A quick background on me: 23 years experience in capital markets, infrastructure, real estate, venture capital, impact investing, and climate tech with various large institutions. 9 years with Lockheed Martin, identifying innovative energy efficiency and clean tech startups, partnering them with utilities and also commercial and industrial clients for pilots and demonstrations. Also worked in energy storage business, and for the past 9 years, I've been mentoring and serving as an EIR to clean tech and climate tech startups, advising them on product market fit, customer discovery, investment readiness, as well as accessing non-dilutive funding. And so some of you might have come across me working with Columbia Tech Ventures and some of the other accelerators, as well as incubators in the New York ecosystem. So just to kind of level set and talk a little bit about this topic, the customer acquisition topic that we're discussing today. We stand at a pivotal moment. Right now, there's an urgency for climate action, and that's undeniable. The innovations within climate tech and other hard tech are accelerating at an incredible pace. And as we know, groundbreaking technologies alone is not enough. We truly make an impact with these solutions. We have to resonate deeply with the right businesses and organizations. So that means that B2B sales generally involve a lot of stakeholder and lengthy decision making, and is not as easy, or there are different strategies that we have to approach when you're doing B2B sales than we would with B2C sales. So in climate tech, this is exacerbated by the need for significant upfront capital. There's also infrastructure changes that have to happen, data with evidence of long-term environmental and economic impact have to be shown. And so businesses and other off-takers need to be convinced of the technology's viability, the reliability, and the return on investment before they even decide to engage with startups. And this usually happens over an extended period of time. So our objective today is to delve into these B2B customer acquisition challenges in climate tech, identify key strategies for navigating these challenges, and help chart paths toward successful customer acquisition plans. First, I will have Tanner from EdgeCom and heard from MPEC tell us about their backgrounds and their companies. And thank you both for joining us here today. Appreciate you being here and sharing your experiences. And then we'll go through a series of questions that consist of our questions and some audience questions that came in prior to this webinar. And then I will open it up for live audience questions. So I will actually pass it off to Tanner, who will talk about his background and give us some information on EdgeCom.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jillian. So pleasure to see everyone here today. I'm Tanner Barron. I'm EdgeCom Energy's VP of Strategic Growth. So kind of just talking super briefly about myself. I've been with EdgeCom for 4 years. So back in 2021, I was actually the 6th hire. We just hit 30 employees. So there's been a lot of growth over the last 4 years, as we'll get to in some of the further slides here. Education-wise, I'm a chemical engineer by education. I've always been passionate about energy sustainability and really getting into some of those more complex kind of projects and solving issues that are really tangible and have very significant impacts for customers. So working in the energy field, especially with some large and very sophisticated industrial and commercial facilities, has always been something that's attractive to me. So EdgeCom Energy checks a lot of boxes. So speaking a little bit more about the company here, at the highest level possible, we're an AI and IoT energy management firm. So our whole goal is to work with large energy consumers and help them reduce their costs, reduce their emissions, and reduce their downtime through a combination of hardware and software solutions. So got a quick slide here talking about kind of our mission and our vision. Really, we view ourselves as playing a key role in enabling that sustainable energy future by helping, honestly, large energy consumers of all sizes. So this can be, manufacturing, large commercial, your data centers, your mines. We work with companies who are as small as, 12-person firms making plastic bags for Walmart, all the way up to facilities that are pushing, 150 megawatts. So again, providing tailored solutions and tailored recommendations that fit the specific needs and priorities of those customers means it's a very complex challenge, and there's a lot of variety in terms of conversations. But really, we're trying to be there to empower those facilities to future-proof their operations and again garner as much savings and emission reductions as possible without jeopardizing what their core business priority is. So next slide here. So looking kind of at a very high level in terms of what that traction looks like so far. We're currently deployed in over 190 facilities across North America. We also have one facility that we're supporting out in Spain. Just in terms of kind of growth, when I joined the company 4 years ago, we were only in Ontario. So we've expanded very rapidly over the last 4 years. At that point in time, we were supporting just under 40 facilities. So there's been, again, a lot of growth here. And I think there's a lot of lessons learned that we can get into further in terms of what strategies have and have not worked and really where it makes sense to be spending a lot of your time. So again, a couple other just quick stats. We're a certified B Corp. So again, really emphasizing and proving out the fact that, sustainability and valuing people, planet, and profits is something that we truly value in the day-to-day operations and the long-term planning of our company. I've also highlighted some of the, more significant and more recognizable brands here across the top of the screen. So again, there's some of the big industrial folks like West Fraser, Stellantis, Paperworks, but there's also a sprinkling or spattering of some of those more commercial businesses that again may or may not be recognizable. Again, we're a little bit more Canadian in nature. We're headquartered in Toronto. Should have mentioned that earlier. So folks like BGIS, Bell, Royal Bank of Canada, Cadillac Fairview again fall solidly into that commercial category. Next slide, please. So looking specifically at what we're doing south of the border, I've highlighted here the main states that we're focusing on. One thing that you notice here is strategy-wise, it doesn't seem to be overly coherent. I'll talk about that a little bit further on some of the other slides. But this has been a very rapid expansion in the grand scheme of things. We only entered the U.S. market in late 2023. So we've been able to secure a good amount of, again, high name and very recognizable customers across a good variety of markets, especially when you're looking at kind of the stack of products from a complexity and a technical requirement point of view. planning that expansion and actually being able to support and launch these offerings in new markets has, a very significant ramp time. So that's something that, again, there's been a lot of growing pains associated with actually taking this into new markets where the product operates significantly differently compared to how it works on our home turf, so to speak. Next slide, please. So coming, and I'll talk at the, at a very high level about what those products look like. Effectively, there's 3 core products, which are those kind of the smaller spheres that you see around the center here. So DataTrack is effectively plug and play network independent IoT. So we're trying to provide visibility into every process, every asset, every machine, show a customer exactly how that asset's consuming electricity and costing them in real time. So we use that to build out a data foundation and help a customer actually understand what's happening within their facility. We can then use that data and leverage it to support the specific priorities or initiatives that an individual customer is trying to achieve. Obviously, again, when you're talking about a large pulp and paper mill, their goals and their objectives are entirely different from a mall or a data center. So again, being flexible in that approach and enabling customers to interact with that data in a way that supports their needs is super critical. Looking at the top left of the screen here, PTrack is effectively everything grid interactivity. So this is predictive analytics for price, peak, emissions. We can also lump in all of our voluntary and mandatory programs. So there's a lot of streamlining and simplification that we do to effectively boil down everything that's happening on the grid to the specific opportunities that make sense for that individual facility, considering what they do and considering what's possible to shift and change throughout their processes. The final product at the bottom of the screen here is what we call NeuroCharge. So for folks that have batteries, generators, building automation systems, rooftop units, we're capable of remotely dispatching and optimizing those assets, considering what's happening both within the facility as well as what's happening on the grid. So one of the big core elements that we had here is, again, being as close to a one-stop shop for energy, as close as we can. So again, combining what we can do on a remote monitoring side of things with your grid interactivity and your predictive analytics, as well as asset dispatch into one platform, means that potential customer can work with us and we can scale them up in terms of sophistication as their energy management needs become more complex. They don't have to go work with 6 different solution providers and 3 consultants to integrate kind of those piecemeal solutions. It's very easy for us to, again, scale those up over time as their needs change. The center element here is effectively, it's more of a connecting piece at this point, and it's kind of baked into the other products. Effectively, we're taking everything an energy manager can do, and we're embedding that into an AI tool. So removing all the number crunching, the report generation, the historical analysis from our customers' plates, and enabling them to spend more time actually acting on energy initiatives as opposed to just looking at energy data. So again, that's baked into all the different products, but for our less sophisticated customers, really serves as kind of that guiding tool to point them towards the most pertinent opportunities for their individual facility. For some of our more sophisticated customers, they're trying to manage thousands of data points in real time. So if I can give you immediate answers as opposed to trying to tab through tons of different dashboards, we can really shorten that time frame to savings and enable them to act on every opportunity that's available to them. Next slide, please. So talking about that AI, there's been a lot of work that we've done on this over the past 12 months. I've highlighted some of the the more recognizable kind of awards that we've won. So there's a couple corporate challenges that we were announced as the winners of. Most recently, Shell ran a new energy challenge, so we won that back in November. ABB and Microsoft ran a startup challenge in April of 2024. So we won that as well out of over 900 participants globally. So we now have an investment and a commercial partnership with ABB. We also get support from AWS, and then I've highlighted some of the other accelerators along the bottom of the screen here that have been key and super helpful and honestly supporting our growth, especially in the US to date. Next slide. So team-wise, we're really, again, combining folks who have directly worked as energy managers within some of the largest plants within North America, as well as that back end academic industry and knowledge folks in, again, the engineering sphere, data science, AI. We've got a lot of engineers on the team, as you can see by how many PEngs and BEngs here we have tagged here. But again, trying to coordinate the worlds of data science, engineering, and energy management into one team so we can really push forward really effective solutions for our customers. Next slide. So before I talk about this slide quickly, I just want to say, if we look back 4 years, and specifically when you're looking at a customer acquisition kind of lens, our strategy was 100% direct sales. So we were purely just cold calling, cold emails, getting out to site visits whenever possible. And I think that's one thing that's rapidly changed, in the 4 years that I've been with Edgecom. So comparing again that entirely direct strategy to what we're doing now, specifically as we expand across the US and more specifically within New York, the sales channels that we're leveraging, direct outreach is always going to be one of those key drivers. We're getting out to more in-person events to leverage again those networking opportunities and locations or opportunities where we can interface directly with customers, partners, and different network players. Accelerators and corporate challenges is something that has played a significant role in our growth over the past 2 years specifically, and will continue to do so, especially as our scope in terms of geographic coverage increases. Customer referrals, especially now that we have a very significant base of customers that we can pull off of, either getting referred into some of their other facilities or their neighbors or folks that are also operate in that industry, is something that we're actively leveraging. And then as of January 2024, we've started opening up some very significant partner channels. So consultants, contractors, utilities, some other complementary clean tech providers. Again, that's kind of an ambiguous category. There's a whole bunch of folks that we can partner with because the data, both internally and from a grid level that we provide, is a massive value added to some other offerings. Another thing that's changed very significantly since I joined the company is what specific verticals we're targeting. So 4 years ago, it was just generally large energy consumers. We've narrowed that down to your more blue collar or your less advanced manufacturing within the categories that you guys see on the screen here. The other side of that is just being a little bit more firm or a little bit more strict in terms of what sizes of facilities that we're targeting. So the minimum that we're really looking to work with or target, at least in direct outreach, is 50,000 square feet. We support facilities, most of our facilities will fall between 50,000 square feet and 1 million square feet. Again, that's a pretty large range, but over time, and especially as we get exposure to different markets, just fleshing out what that targeting looks like and how we're identifying and firming up what that ICP looks like. So again, this is just kind of specifically some of the strategies at a very high level that we're deploying right now and how that compares to what was happening 4 years ago. I think this is the last slide I've got here, so I'll hand it back over to Jillian, but looking forward to getting into more of the questions and lessons learned later. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanner. And now we'll have her speak.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to pull up my my deck here. All right. Should be good to go. Well, thank you everyone for being here today, and thank you for having me. I know we have a lot of questions to cover, so I'll do my best to move through my presentation as quickly and efficiently as I possibly can. So what we're building at MPEC is the built world intranet. And it really is, well, what is the intranet, right, as opposed to an internet? And for those of you that are in the data world, probably know when Google came out, maybe 2012, with the knowledge graph and kind of that concept of connecting all sorts of things through a kind of a more advanced relational database. It became a really big thing. But now things have kind of matured from there. And now we have something that's been introduced that's by, I believe, Gartner, maybe last year or year before, referred to as a data fabric, right? And it's about how all these kind of data sources and people that are touching data, to include folks like Edgecom and billing owner, billing operators, service providers, are all talking to each other. And it's really around, like, how does data go from data ingestion to data access to data orchestration to data discovery and many other kind of disconnected places, right? And in today's world, that all needs to come together very quickly for many companies that are still operating with systems that are probably 20 years old or older, that have worked just fine, that they've made super efficient, and they are excellent at whatever they're doing. That is an old process that worked great for them. But now with the introduction of deep tech, to include generative AI and many others, even blockchain and other deep tech, there is a big disconnect between the way things used to be and the way things are now today, and where industry is going. And there's a lot of companies scrambling to figure out how to just update right across the organization, to include workflows and processes and how they're capturing and organizing data and enriching data and curating that data, authenticating that data, and then of course sending it over for intelligence and other activities. And that's where we are in the middle of all of that. Go to my next slide here. So our mission is at MPEC is revolutioning how the built world connects, understands, and acts by unleashing real-time asset intelligence through an AI-powered fusion of a knowledge graph and data fabric. Right? As our mission kind of states here, it's about asset intelligence, right? And then so, for those of you that have been in the built world, understand what that a lot of energy efficiency is really based on assets, right? And how well assets run. It could be anything from chillers to boilers to, solar panels, whatever it might be. Those are all assets that are doing something to either provide or reduce, energy, and comfort in buildings, whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of data and infrastructure, the data infrastructure that supports those assets, and of course the people that have to work on those assets, buy those assets, sell those assets, operate those assets. And that is where MPEC comes into the middle of everything. My background is I'm a U.S. Marine. I done over 300 critical infrastructure audits, mostly energy audits and asset inventory and audits in all sorts of different buildings, from residential to multifamily to industrial and um, hospitals, you name it. Been there, done that. I've been on the rooftops getting sunburned, and in the basements with the spiders getting bit. I've seen it all, and I'm very passionate about this industry, just because there's so much latent data and latent opportunity that's there to really just bring it into, I guess, really industry 2.0 or 3.0 at this point. Um, so I'm going to share some interesting statistics to just kind of give a better idea of what's out there and why we're really interested in this industry, and kind of how it's all connected within this knowledge graph. So an interesting statistic I'll share is that 83% of commercial buildings in the United States have equipment that looks just like this. It's equipment that's past its useful life. It should be replaced with some of the billions of dollars of annual federal and utility money that goes unused as incentives. Literally just free money that's out there that can replace old stuff with new for a fraction of the cost, right? And the ROI is just incredible. But the issue is that many times it's not getting replaced because there's a real-time disconnect between the important and accurate information on these assets and the decision maker, right? To be able to make investment grade decisions. And I mean deep, detailed asset information. I'm not talking, high level flyover, benchmarking data. That is not a detail level or investment grade level of information that a building owner or operator needs to make a financial decision. They need asset detail level information, and that's a big driver as to why these buildings are not getting upgraded. I'm going to introduce you to an airplane, a military airplane here. It's like, what do you have? What do the two assets have in common? There's actually a few-month-old report that came out by the U.S. Air Force, a mission-capable report that's showing that over 50% of our nation's legacy bomber fleet, to include the B-52 here shown here, are not ready to fly. And a lot of that is this disconnect that I mentioned in the first slide that exists in not only the built environment, but also for the military and other industries, that they're still using all these old legacy processes. And this is literally one of our customers at the Air Force. This is them doing things the old way before our technology was introduced to them. So this is kind of where things come into this knowledge graph and data fabric and in the kind of the built world internet that we're building around critical infrastructure, right? And it is important to know that there is kind of a three-step process that we brought to the market around curating data, working with third parties or our own solutions to ingest this data, to authenticate, to validate, to enrich that data with all sorts of other information that might be out there from many different sources, and then put that all together for analysis either by our platform or some of the many others, right? So there's this kind of this data flow that that happens. And certainly, you know, working with folks like Tanner's company and EdgeCom and many others that are out there that do very different things within this ecosystem to really kind of put it all together to be able to increase the velocity of decision making. How we go to market is we love the mid funnel, right? We've all heard of the sales funnel. There's top of funnel, there's bottom funnel. We love bottom funnel because that's usually where our customers come in at a high chance of close rates. But we really like the mid funnel if we can ever, you know, really get there, and that's kind of our golden target. We can talk more about that later. But we really go through third-party vendors within to get to that mid funnel. Direct sales, we are old school. We do pick up the phone. We do go to conferences and talk to people. Typically, the people that we're talking to are going to be more senior in their companies, and this is a great way to prospect with them. Partnerships, we have a good number of exclusive partnerships. I'll talk about that next slide. And then also market makers. One of our largest customers is now requiring all of their vendors, and they're a $23 billion annual cap company, require their vendors to use our technology to do the work that we can do for them. So as I mentioned, here's some of our partners. AFWERX is the Air Force, Canadian government's red screen product. So we are a partner with the government of Canada, right, our northern neighbors, and Tanner and his team up there. Air Force Research Lab, Simani, Department of Energy, the industrial assessment centers are using our technology to do their work within buildings and built environment. And of course, NYSERDA has been a huge partner of ours since the beginning. But with all that being said, I will stop there. I promise to keep it short, and but happy to take additional questions.
Great. Thank you, Herb. Thank you, Tanner. So we'll just jump into some questions that we have, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I'm sure there will be a lot of interest. So as we've mentioned, B2B sales is more complex, and since you guys are veterans in this customer acquisition strategy and just thinking about the market, as a startup with limited capital, where should I start? Like if I'm a startup, where should I start thinking about, you know, to allocate my time and resources for my customer acquisition strategy? And then also in that, you know, maybe you can mention if you had any missteps in the initial time of your customer acquisition strategy in the beginning. Herb, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So how much time do we have to talk about missteps? I mean, you know, it's being a startup is all about iteration, right? And testing, and you know, you're going to be very, very unlikely to get it right out of the gate. Very unlikely, which will require a lot of testing, innovation, and iteration as well. So with all that being said, you know, you really need to start at the very, very beginning, and really do a really good job of testing who you believe your target customer and target market really is. We went through this iteration with a large utility. We got all the way through to a very large multi-million-dollar contract, and we were about to sign it, and things were looking good, and this was going to, you know, cement our company's future. And I was really excited looking at exit, you know, and everything else. And then that utility's senior management's like, yeah, we're redoing the entire structure of the organization. And lo and behold, a year later, they contact us like, hey, you want to participate in this program we came out with? It was eerily similar to the program we designed, and we were under contract to go to market with. But they didn't execute well, and it turned out being a flop. But you know, the moral of the story here is kind of a couple fold. Number one, we need to do a better job of doing customer discovery early on. And you know, we ended up going through a program after that called the NSF I-Core Nationals program. There's regional courses. Highly recommend anyone that is on this call, anyone, to go through at least the regionals course. If you can get into the nationals program, great. You're going to learn a lot about yourself, about what you're bringing to market, and who's willing to buy it and why, because you have to put on a scientist hat and ask lots of questions. We didn't get a chance to do that in the first iteration of our company, but we did get that through the second. And when we pivoted, we did a hard pivot a few years ago into who we are, and it made all the difference ever since. The other side of this is be very careful about putting all your eggs in one basket. I know as startups, you get really excited about the big customer and you're like, this is going to make it for me, but you have all your eggs in one basket. And with big, especially selling an enterprise that we do, there's multiple stakeholders that have multiple levels of authority and decision making. And if you only have one, say, champion in that organization, they go away, you're really in trouble. And so, whenever you possibly can, diversify, right, and have multiple customers, but then also understand, going back to what I mentioned about customer personas, really do a great job of identifying and defining who that customer persona is. And when you go to market, if it doesn't fit, it's not working, don't be afraid to reiterate, even hard pivot. No matter what people say, sometimes you have to really go with your gut and do with what's right.
I think kind of building on that point there, the identifying and iterating on that customer persona and that ideal customer persona is super key. I think one thing that we did a poor job of was trying to be the service provider for everyone. Especially again, when you have limited resources, it's trying to identify which customer segment, which type of facility, which, location, of potential customer can you provide the most value to, and how can you use some of that initial traction to dominate that one specific vertical and then start expanding out and spilling out into different sectors or different kind of types of customers. So I think being focused in terms of how you're expanding or how you're iterating and kind of experimenting with where you're actually providing the most bang for your buck, the most value to those individual customers. I think there's also a trap that you can fall into in terms of analysis paralysis and trying to push the needle forward on 1,000 different fronts, as opposed to taking one idea from ideation all the way to kind of completion. And then again, once that team starts growing, once you have that traction, once you have some case studies in specific verticals or with specific customers with names that you can start dropping, then you can start to expand that scope outside what that initial kind of beachhead market looks like. So not trying to do too much from day one, I think is also, or sorry, too much for too many people at day one is kind of one of the big takeaways that I have from what our traction and progress has looked like.
Okay, and I think from your comments, we have probably two questions that we can kind of expand on. So I think there's something in the chat I just saw it flash across. Herb, you mentioned about pivoting and having to like reinvent your strategy. And we spoke about it during our prep call. Can you talk a little bit about that pivot that you moved away from? I think it was during the pandemic.
Yeah, it was actually at the very, very beginning of the pandemic, literally a month before the pandemic was announced, is when we internally pivoted. So made the pivot even more difficult and challenging. But it was, I can tell you, going through the NSFI course program, it really gave us a lot of insights. We're just talking to our would-be customers. And we went to market thinking that off-balance sheet financing was the solution to unlocking more commercial energy projects, only because I experienced that over 300 times doing this myself. So surely everyone else must be experiencing the same thing. But and it is true. But then when you start talking about scale, you start talking about who buyers are and decision makers are, things change. And so that's one thing that we had to, learn through the I-Core program. And when we did pivot, we pivoted into a AI essentially first company, right? We built our own AI. It's our own proprietary backend, and we have a very, very large proprietary database of all sorts of assets and pieces of equipment, and to include electronic parts that are in those assets, and that continues to expand every single day. But the value has changed, and the amount of value that we've unlocked in the marketplace has also changed. But also who we're selling to in the market also changed, and we had to iterate a few times even during the pivot, because we still thought we were selling to the end user, which was people like me. But that actually turned out to be that's not who we're selling to today.
Right. And what did it take a significant like revamp of your customer acquisition strategy or how you were approaching customers? So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I think there's a big distinction to be made between a pivot and iteration, right? Iteration is fine-tuning your business model, and and that could be to change your customer acquisition strategy. That is not a pivot. That is that maybe a repositioning or remessaging. A pivot is really a completely different offering of product, and maybe in the same customer type, but it may be just completely different. It's like Tanner's company going and starting to sell oil and gas. They're still certain, they're probably selling to the same customer, but it's a very different product. That's a pivot. But with pivots do come, like you mentioned, Jillian, a redefinition of maybe the customer, of how you're going to target them, how you're going to communicate with them, and that all came together as a package. The bottom line, our customers still wanted to close more projects faster. That didn't change, right? How we were making that happen for them did change, and also same with our scope and just the size of the marketplace blossomed, right? And when we pivoted, it's 30x, 100x, even I'm not thinking of the numbers, 100x the size of what it was, pre-pivot. So that really turned us into a venture, backable company. Before we really weren't. It probably would have turned into a lifestyle business looking back on it, right? So that all kind of comes into play, and these are all things you have to weigh. Even as you're iterating and pivoting, am I talking to the right person, the right people, the right buyer? Who is the buyer? Who's the user? That many times they may be two separate people, and you need to communicate your value prop, especially in the enterprise world, differently.
Yeah, and I think on that iteration versus pivot side of things, iteration is like, you can treat that as branches of a tree. So yeah, you're gonna have five things you're gonna try, and three of them aren't gonna work. So you can invest further in nurturing those two branches, which will inevitably have five more branches each with five different things that grow off of it, and it'll just continue expanding forever. The pivot side of things is you're planting an entirely new tree.
Yeah, great. That's a great. I like that a lot. Great analogy.
Yeah.
Again, like in some businesses, you're going to try 100 things and 99 of them won't work, but that one that you can find traction with can kind of blossom and grow into its own, matrix of additional decisions and things to experiment and try out. So keeps it exciting at the very least.
Yeah, most definitely. So you've identified who your customer is. Now you get down to this, it's a large corporation or it's a business. Now you're looking for your point of contact. How do you go about that? And what has your experience been with point of contacts at various organizations that you've worked with? Tana, I'm going to have you answer that one because there's a particular one that we want to talk about, and you know what? So.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways that you can go about it. If you look at what we were originally doing kind of a few years back, it was almost purely direct on an individual facility basis. So those conversations, they were fruitful in terms of scope of what we could support. It actually made a lot more sense to just take it to the facility operator, the plant manager. If there's an energy manager, we'll take it directly to them. Growth wise, it meant that hopping into another facility from that one facility that we were currently serving was, arduous to say the least. I think that's one thing that's really started to swing over probably the last 18 to 24 months, is actually being able to support more of those conversations on a corporate level, and have those actually trickling down from the C-suite and the folks who are actually making those high level strategic decisions, who can then, again, we can work collaboratively with them. Eventually we're always going to have to take it to the facility side folks to get these deals pushed through, but it means, again, in one fell swoop we can sign 8, 20, 50 facilities as a result of kind of one engagement, as opposed to working our way, one by one. Especially when you have a lot of facility managers who just blatantly don't care about, passing you on to another facility that's, 6 states over. So I think that's one thing that, again, being realistic in terms of, notoriety wise and what you can and cannot support. If you're a startup and you got, hey, I've got one pilot that I'm running right now, is it going to be worth your time to go after and target a massive corporate? Maybe not. So how can you build up some of those wins kind of in the interim, so you eventually have some significant ammo that you can then take to a corporate level and actually push that forward, and again get to those juicier, those deals that have a longer lifetime value, and do cover kind of multiple geographic regions. That's kind of my initial thoughts on that. Jillian, is there another
Yeah, and then just like pulling on that thread. So you have a point of contact there. How do you build trust, and how do you make it position yourself where, if that point of contact, one, that they have some sort of influence, obviously, with the other decision makers, but if that point of contact leaves, where are you, and how can, if they do leave, you get benefited from that? You actually have a
Yeah.
story,
And
right?
I got stories on both sides of it. So I think
Yeah.
one, especially when you have, again, I think, both myself and Herb, the products that we provide, is there an ideal point of contact that will get the most value out of our product? Absolutely. Is there secondary benefits that can be provided and pushed through, not only multiple chains of seniority across an organization, but also multiple different divisions? So I think that's when you get into that three wide, three deep. So again, I think Herb, you mentioned it before. In enterprise sales, there's never a single decision maker and there's never a single stakeholder. So getting as many of those folks as engaged as possible. And once you have some sort of traction with those customers, reiterating what that benefit and what that value proposition has been as many times as humanly possible. So it's not just your one decision maker that's really sold and can act as a champion, but you do have some other folks who are, who are on your side of the table. I think is super important. On the opposite side of that, when you do have an internal champion that absolutely loves your product, keeping an eye on them and making sure that they're still nurtured so that when they do eventually, potentially either work for a different facility, there you go. Easy kind of upsell there, and you've got another customer. If they work for another company, you also have an initial in and some sort of network that you can start to leverage to deploy your solutions, or at least get a conversation started at the very least. So we've got a couple folks who are repeat customers across now 4 different companies working in vastly different industries. So we've got one internal champion who is now just effectively within 2 months of moving companies each time, she's just directly leveraged almost our full stack of products in that new company across multiple facilities. So again, there's dangers on both sides. But ensuring that you can, not only leverage that initial connection into, a larger network of contacts, so you don't have a single point of failure within those, within some of those businesses, but also ensuring that, again, you can nurture those relationships long term and establish something that is, on some levels, a much more personal connection, so that you can leverage that longer term when and if they do eventually leave the current customer that you guys are working with. So lessons on both sides for sure.
Sure. Herb, do you have any comments on that, or we can go to the next question?
The 2 comments I'll add is one,
Mhm.
always keep in mind that 2 is 1 and 1 is none. You ask any member of my team, they'll tell you I say it all the time. So, you having 1 contact in the organization is having no contact in the organization. Just keep that in mind. Just always
Okay.
have 2. And especially my second comment is, especially if you're a dual use company like MPEC, we do sell into the federal government, mostly the United States Air Force. We just won a $2 million TACFI contract. And there's weird things that happen. Like one of our customers, the entire senior command just rotated out, so we don't have any more contact there, right? It's like, and that's not on the TACFI, that's on a different contract. But so there are these weird kind of dynamics for enterprise as well as in the federal government. You think they're similar, they're kind of not. They are different. But yeah, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Keep that in mind.
Okay. No, that's great. Thanks for that advice. I'm going to open it up early to the audience just to make sure that we get your questions answered. So, Taylor, how are we doing this? Do they just come off mic and speak, or Krista, how
Yeah,
are we?
they can raise their hand
Okay.
or they put it in the chat.
Okay.
I answered 1 question from the chat. Who else has questions? Ellie.
Ellie.
Yes, good afternoon, and so good to see everybody. I'm just curious if you have any insights about how to best approach what is a long sales cycle. Micro Era Power has developed a thermal long-duration energy storage technology. It's a companion technology with heat pumps or chillers. We're not a standalone, so we need to be integrated with a larger energy retrofit, and those timelines are anywhere from 6 to 18 months. And so do you have any suggestions of, at what time do you come into the conversation when your technology is still being finalized? We're patented, proven, we're out in the field now. But to get those next customers, would really appreciate any insights or stories you have to share.
I think
Danny, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So we also fall into the same bucket. Our sales cycles are incredibly long because a lot of what we're trying to push through is changing, culturally or operationally how companies are considering data and energy in their workflows. So we work with some customers who have before had no consideration for anything that's happening, or very little consideration for anything that's happening price and energy wise, in terms of how they're running their operations. So there's a lot of uphill battles in terms of actually getting multiple stakeholders involved and slowly converting those different teams to actually, again, so they can work on your behalf to sell other folks on the team. So I think the biggest thing that's beneficial there is if you do have a contact and if you do have a customer account that you're super confident that you can provide value into, consistency is something that you cannot, undervalue. There's a customer that, from doing a site visit to signing a free pilot with them, free pilot, there's no dollar changing hands, it took 17 months. But I was confident without a shadow of a doubt that we could massively improve what they were doing across, we're talking 10 plus locations across the US. So being consistent and also engaging with that customer and translating that value proposition in terms of what we can do in a tailored way to the different folks that we're engaging with. So who I was talking to and the messaging that I was providing to someone who was boots on the ground within an individual facility to sell them was entirely different than the messaging and proposition that I was pushing forward to their chief sustainability officer. So translating that message and being consistent in terms of engaging with folks, not only across multiple different teams and levels of seniority, but in different ways as well. So at the very least, some of that outreach just blatantly might not result in a conversation, but at least when you get to the table and you're like, hey, we're 3 months into this, call it an engagement, and you have now 6, 7, 10, 15 people at the table, at least half of them have seen, your name and your company's name pop up on LinkedIn or in their inbox, or you've left them a message. So there's at least some sort of kind of warm foundation that you're building off of on top of kind of those tailored connections that you've built with them. And again, could be over a span of weeks, could be months, could be years. So I think the only other thing that I'd throw on top of that is, because you guys have a dependence on other projects, how can you develop partners or an additional network so that you can hitch your wagon and leverage some of those existing networks to start getting more conversations on the go, and it's not entirely related or reliant on your own efforts in terms of starting these conversations and being there, right time, right place. There's always going to be an element of it of, how can I make it so that when the time comes, I am the default option and ideally the only person that comes to mind. And again, leveraging those networks is a lot more effective in some ways as opposed to just, hammering the phones and emails.
And Tanner, that part of what you said resonates so well, because we do have a champion at the place that's hosting our first fielded system, and they have been just a huge proponent for us, and it's fantastic. All the different institutions they reach with that message on our behalf. It's an incredible multiplier.
For sure. And I think we've got a small group of folks now that it's just, the testimonial printing press. So if they're okay with being contacted, it's one thing if you see a quote from them on their website, but if they're open to like, hey, yeah, send, I'm more than happy to support and pass on my number to any potential, not any potential, but if you do have someone who's kind of on the fence, more than happy to have a conversation. Again, not every single customer is going to be open to that. And some folks are just blatantly too busy or not interested. But if you can get a couple folks that, again, cover some of your key verticals or cover some of the key markets that you're in, you have a fantastic resource in terms of, hey, can you refer me to your neighbor? Like, their facility looks fantastic and I know I can do X, Y, and Z for them. Or I'm talking to, Bob, who's 2 provinces over. He's got a couple questions in terms of kind of how this is rolled out for a current customer. Are you open to having a quick chat? So a bunch of different ways that you can leverage that into, again, taking that success and amplifying it across different places.
That was an excellent response. One thing that I'll add is I guess I have a great product in my career. By the way, I'm going to come from that industry, and in the project life cycle is very, very long from the time that a building owner operator, someone's like, hey, I'd love to do something in my building, to the time that it gets installed and it's now being maintained and operated. That's a very long cycle. And so, maybe consider looking into somewhere in the middle and expanding out maybe as Tanner recommended, right? That network that might exist maybe with the architects and engineers and partnering with more of them to help you scale so they can start selling your product when they're doing the design of those systems. And I think there may be something there that might help you just scale faster and with a higher ROI. I saw a question here from Jeff about, our ROI with time. When your time, it's, your time is worth a lot of money, right? So it's like, what's your return on time? And, if you look for ways to partner and help them help you scale, that might be really effective for you.
I think also
Kelly.
talking to Jeff's question here a little bit, or Jeffrey's question a little bit further. Determining the ROI of working together with a specific partner. We're big proponents of, piloting, especially again, super pertinent when you're pushing forward with an enterprise that could have a multi-million-dollar lifetime value associated with them. We also apply the exact same thing when we're working with new partners. So one, just sussing out in terms of business approach, legitimacy, how they actually deal with kind of conflict before you have anything kind of, hard and firm signed with a potential partner, taking some sort of, either it's a shared customer or just taking some sort of proof of concept where you can both push your offerings or your services forward in some sort of, friendlier environment, just to prove out kind of what that looks like. And then you actually have very specific numbers or some sort of, again, anonymized case study in terms of what the combined service or the combined services or products can actually push forward in terms of ROI within that specific use case. Obviously, again, like you're always going to be able to hopefully leverage the past deployments that you have, whether they're pilots, whether they're paid, and have some sort of metrics that you can push out. But if you can get something that's specific to how it's worked in relation to another product, that's kind of ideal. And again, pilots and proof of concepts with a friendly are the easiest way to push that forward in my mind.
Yeah, another way I look at it is the Gestalt theory of relationships, right? That the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? So if you can have you come together with your partners, and whoever it might be, and you could create something greater than the sum of its parts, that's value, right? You're creating value, right? And then the quantification of that value is what Jeff's referring to as the ROI. You can partner with all sorts of people out there, and you can probably create value to all sorts of people and organizations, but how do you maximize that value, right? Because you have a limited amount of time, especially as a startup, you have a limited amount of resource as well, especially capital. You run out of money, you're done, game over, right? So you really have to spend your time judiciously, and that's focusing on that ROI of partnerships is really critical.
Okay, I think we have 3 more minutes, but I think Krista needs a couple of minutes or so. Krista, or a minute? What do you need?
You guys think I could jump in on one more question?
Yeah, I was gonna
Yes.
say
Yeah,
maybe
one more.
one
Right.
quick question.
All right,
and
Herb
then,
and
yeah.
Tanner, what were can you name the most difficult decision you had to make in passing on an opportunity for all the reasons you noted, Herb?
Oh, wow, that's a really great question, Marty. There, I think there's also the opportunity cost, and I guess we go first. Just that decision to pivot. But Marty, that was the hardest decision I had to make in my professional life, and the teams made, because we left something that was working, and we're still making money from that old business model still to this day with zero losses. Knock on wood. It would have been, looking back on it, it would have been a very successful business, and we knew that at that time. However, we also knew that if we continued, like I mentioned earlier, it was going to become a lifestyle business, and that's not what we promised the early investors that we brought on, to include Launch New York, right? And that was a hard decision to make for us.
Thanks. Tanner, any thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've had some folks on our board in the past, and some other folks in the network that we've launched products focused on specific verticals that weren't directly aligned with where the company's true strengths lay. So making the decision to stop funding or stop supporting specific products that we'd supported for a span of months and just had no traction to prove it out, despite what in the grand scheme of things could have been a great idea. So again, I think trying to avoid over diversification too early was one part of it. So we had a couple products early on that we just deprecated very quickly, because it was clear that, hey, if we actually want to support this, we're gonna have to hire another 20 people who have very little in common with kind of what the rest of the products are trying to do. So that's one side of it. And I think we've also had some other kind of looking at that more on an account basis. Some corporates who, especially when you're early on, you're like, yes, I get to work with this company. And all of a sudden their laundry list of requirements, 25% of it is totally within scope and really what you want to be doing. And the other 75%, you're like, whoa, I have no idea what this is.
Absolutely, Tanner. Yeah. Maybe
Yeah,
put out some dev shop.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what we
Like,
talked about. Yeah.
is it worth it to totally change my product to get this one customer? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on scale, where you are, really what that looks like. But I think those are kind of two lessons learned there, or two painful decisions that we had to make on. Well,
Thank
actually,
you
a couple.
both.
Well, yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Marnie.
Sorry, we've run out of time, and I know Krista would like to wrap up, but just thank you both for this really interesting conversation on a topic that is important to a lot of startups in this position. But Krista, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jillian, Tanner, Herb, Marnie. It is always helpful, as you mentioned, to hear from those who've done this already. And so I know there were questions that we answered about identifying point of contact, building trust, knowing your value proposition, and ultimately when to pivot, right? So that it's huge. And so we really appreciate you sharing these stories so others can learn. And we hope that for the audience, this helped you to think about your next steps with customer acquisition, and also know that we are here. The entire launch community is here to support you. Reach out when you have questions, if you're looking for where to go for resources, and certainly sign up for our next 2 webinars, right? Next month, again, sponsored by NYSERDA, Jillian will be back for the hour talking about non-dilutive funding options. And then we'll be talking about community partnerships in July. So we hope you will join us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.